What is going on, fellow web developers? My name is Tyler Potts, and in today's video we're going to be learning the basics of JavaScript. Now this will be a series. This is going to start off with some very basic stuff such as variables, functions and eventlessness, and then we'll move on to some more hardcore JavaScript and more advanced stuff later on. So in this one we're just going to get started. Now there's a few things you need to know or have before we can get started. The first thing you need to have is a code editor, a text editor. You can use any one. You can use Notepad++, you can use WebStorm, you can use Visual Studio Code or even Visual Studio. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. It's what I always use. You can hit download for Windows. You can either use Mac OS, Windows or Linux. It runs everywhere. It's free and it's open source, so you can come to this website here, code.visualstudio.com, and download that for yourself. Now the second thing you need to know is HTML. Now you don't need to know CSS, although that is a benefit. However, you will need to know HTML because we're going to be manipulating the DOM, changing things on a DOM and actually using it. So let's just minimize this for now and start in here. So the first thing we want to do is create a HTML file. So I'm just going to create one called index.html. And then in here we need some boilerplate code. Okay, so the first thing we want to do in this file is do an exclamation mark and hit tab if you're using Visual Studio Code. If not, you're going to want to write out all this code here. So you start off with a doc type, you then add some HTML opening and closing tag with a lang attribute. This is not necessary, you can add it or you don't have to. Then we're going to need a head with its metadata. The important one here is this here, the scale. That will just help with responsiveness. And there we have the title. So this is going to be JavaScript Basics Lesson 1. There you go. And then inside the body, we can add in our HTML. So first off, let's just say we want a div in here with a H1 that says hello world, just like that. Then we can hit save and we can open this file. So if we just right click here and say reveal in File Explorer, we have this file here. We can actually either drag and drop this into Chrome or double click it and that will open it up here. So here you go, you can see this is what we currently have and what we're working with. Now what we want to add JavaScript is we want to make our web page interactive. So how do we do that? What we want to do is go into back into our Visual Studio Code or our text editor, create a new file, and I'm going to call this main.js. Now this is a JavaScript file. This is where all your JavaScript will go into. Now what is JavaScript? JavaScript is it's a programming language that adds interactivity to your website. So if you've just got a website and it's just sat there not really doing much, can't really click much, you know, all of that, the way to actually get past that, the way to make it more fun or interactive is to add JavaScript to your website, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. Now if we go into our index, we can actually write something called a script, and we can add a source attribute to this script to actually locate and add in a file. Now here we can just type the path to the file, and because it's in the root directory, all we have to do is say main.js and that will link our file. Now in here we can do a bunch of different things. Now I'm going to use something called a console.log, and I'm just going to say hello world again here. Now don't worry if you don't understand what I'm doing right now. This is just to test our script is working. So a console log will log something to our web browser's console. Now how do you open the console on your browser? So how you do that is you can right click and go inspect, or you can press F12 if you're on Windows. I think it's Control Alt I or Command Alt I to open it up on a Mac, and I don't know how to do it on a Linux. So we're just going to right click and click inspect, and that's going to open up this tab on the right side here. Now we want the console, so we can either look at it down here or we can hit this one here. Now to get it to work, we're going to have to refresh this page because obviously we've just made a change. If we refresh, you can actually see we get a console log saying hello world. And to show you that's definitely working, just in case you're paranoid, we can add, let's say, a few more exclamation marks, go back, refresh, and you can see that has changed here. So now we can tell our script is working, it's connected to our front end. So what can we do with our JavaScript? So the first thing we're going to look into is variables. Now variables allow you to store information, and there's three types of variables you can use. There is a var, which is just the basic variable. You can give it a name. So you start off with var, we have let, and we have const. And I'll explain those in a minute. So let's start off with var. So we can say var, which stands for variable. And we can give our variable a name. So this can be anything you want. So let's just say name, right? So we'll give ourselves a name. And when we set that equal to a value, now there's 3 different types. Well, there's more than 3, but we're going to go over 3 in this video. Data types we can assign. We can either assign a string, which is, for example, John, Tyler, whatever we want to put in there. We can also give it a number, so let's say 56, or we can add in a true or false, which is these values we're going to look at today. So we have a variable called name, and we can say Tyler. Now there's other ways to do this. We could also say let name equal, and this is a different way to handle to declare a variable. Another one is constant. And there's a few differences between all 3 of these. So we have a const, a let, we'll just call this test, and we'll set this to a number, or say age actually, here we go, and we can say 24 currently. And then we can say var, which could also be is cool, true, there we go, good job Copilot. And there you go, you can see we have here 3 different types. There's other ones where there's arrays and objects, but we won't get into that into this video. They're more advanced topics to go over. So let's say we start with constant. So what is constant? Constant is a variable you can declare once, but you can never change it again. So let's say we have a constant's name, Tyler. If we then wanted to reset Tyler to be equal to, let's say, Dave, this is going to throw an error, and you can see that here it says name. Oh, name is deprecated. That's not what it is. But basically, because name is already assigned here as a constant, we can't change this. However, if we try to change the age to, let's say, be 25, you can see there's no error. It's not throwing any error. This just works fine here. So that is what we can do with constants. And the difference between var and let is to do with scope, which is something we'll get into later. For now, just know that let and var are basically the same thing. They do something slightly different, but that's for more advanced topics. So we'll just stick with const and let for today, so we can have a constant and a let. So what do we want to do? Let's say we now got a variable. We want to actually get into something else. So let's say we want to get our name. So let's say let name is equal to, and we'll just go put in here Tyler. Now let's say we want to change this from saying hello world to hello Tyler, so to say our name. So what we can do here, we can actually get this element and change it by using some JavaScript functions. So in here we can say const. So let's do a constant now and call this the title, because that's what this is, the title underscore element. And that's going to be this here. Now we're going to set this equal to document. Now document is everything inside your DOM. So this is everything here inside of this. You can then say dot, and we can find element by ID. We can do a query selector, and there's a few other things we can do to actually get the reference to this here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say query selector, and this is just going to get us an item. Now we can pass in here, this is the same, if you know what CSS is, you'll know how these selectors work. We can get something with the ID of title. We could also get something with the class of title, or we can aim for just a tag. So this is going to be it's going to get the first H1 tag inside of the DOM, the document. And in here, I'm just going to say console.log, and we can say title element, just like that. So that should log us the title element. So back here, refresh, and you can see if we hover over this element in the right here, you can see it's actually referenced to this here. Now let's say we try to add in a second H1. Let's just add 2 H1s. The second one will say hello Bob, just for contrasting. You see we got hello Bob and hello world. You can see we still only get the first tag, which is hello world. If we go and swap these round and say hello Bob first, you'll see we get hello Bob's tag here instead, because it's the first element it's grabbing. Now we can do something called query selector all, which will get an array of elements, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to stick to just the basic H1. But that's more stuff you can do in research if you want to research. So let's just stick with our hello world. Now we want to change this to say hello Tyler, for example, or hello to our name. Now how we can do this is we can say title underscore element dot inner text. So you can either change the inner text, which allows you to change the text, or you could do inner HTML, which allows you to add HTML in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say inner text is equal to, and we can use either backticks here, and we can say hello, and then pass through this string here. So this is a template literal, and this is a way to actually pass through a variable. So we can say name, and that's going to pass it through. Ignore that it's throwing an error. It's some linting is being weird. It's doing a TypeScript error, which is fine. So there we go. So that should pass our name in here. So if we go here and we refresh, you can see it's changed it to say hello Tyler. So that's now in our HTML, it says hello world. But because we're changing it inside of our main.js file, it's actually going to change it here. Now, I showed you how to do this here like this, but there's other ways you could write this. We could put hello, comma, space, and then we can use the plus to add to this string, and we can say name. And this is another way you can write this. So this will work the exact same. You can see it starts off with hello world, and then it changes to hello Tyler. And there you go, that's one way to do it. However, I prefer using the template literals. It looks cleaner and it works better for me. And there you go, so that's that. Now, this is all cool, this is all fun to do. However, this isn't very interactive. You're not really clicking anything. So let's add something called an event listener and a function. So let me just explain what a function is first. So what we're going to do is we're going to create let name, and we're just going to leave that as a blank string. Right, now we're going to have a function which we're going to give this function a name. Let's say set title, and inside of here I can then say I can actually pass through this stuff here. Now currently the reason I have set name to be a blank string is for one reason only, and that is because we're going to change the name in here. So you can update a let variable. If it was a constant, we couldn't. Because it's a let variable, what you can do is we can say name is equal to, and then let's just say Tyler like that. And now that will set the name in here. However, with functions, you can actually pass through parameters or options inside of your thing. So let's say here, new name, or say just new. We can actually just say name here, for example. Now what we want to do is let's just comment out this. So if you put 2 slashes at the front of any line inside of JavaScript, it will comment out, meaning this will not actually have any effect in the code. It's just there to show you in the code it's there. So now let's just remove this, delete that, and now we have this name. So what we can do is we need to call this function. This isn't going to work on its own. If we go back and we refresh, nothing will happen. You can see it still says hello world. So how do we get this to work? Well, we have to call a function, and to call a function we can say set title and then pass through these parentheses. Again, this isn't going to really work because we're not actually passing anything. So if we just save this, we go back and we refresh, you can see it says undefined. And that's just a type that means it's erroring, it doesn't have a value. And that's because our name here, we're not actually passing anything through. So how do we pass this parameter through? Well, you can actually go into this title inside these parentheses and pass through a string, let's say Tyler, like this. Let's go back and refresh, and there you go, it says hello Tyler. Now you can pass anything you want through here. You can say hello Bob, and it will change it to hello Bob. And that's how you kind of use functions inside JavaScript. But again, that's just doing the same thing we did before, but wrapping it in a function. So how do we make this so you can actually click to change, for example? So let's just add a button inside of here and say click me. Just like this. And there you go. So now we have a button in our HTML. You can see it says click me. It doesn't do anything yet. So let's go back. Let's delete this set title function. So we're not calling it. We're going to keep the actual function, but we're going to remove the call to it. And what we want to do, we want to create an event listener, and that listens for events on the page, such as scrolling, clicking, dragging. There's a bunch of different events you can listen to, such as mouse movements, click pressing down and lifting up the key. There's a bunch of different ones we can do, but for now we're going to look at click. So what we want to say here is we need to get a reference to what we want to click, and we're going to want to click this button. So we can actually do this. We can say const button element is equal to document.query selector, and then we can pass through our button here. Now, to show you a bit more of advanced stuff here, I'm going to go into here and we're going to add a title or an ID to this, and we're going to call this the name button, for example, because it's going to change our name. So this has an ID of name. So how do we get that specifically? So if we have multiple buttons, but we want to get the one with the ID of name, we can put in here hashtag name, and that's going to get us any with the ID of name. And that way it will get that button still. So let's just log this button real quick. Let's just say button L log, go back to our HTML, refresh, and you can see we get our button here. You can see it's right here, it's working, and we actually have reference to it. So let's just remove this console log, and let's now say we want to add a click event listener to this button. So what we're going to say is button L dot add event listener, and then we can say click. Now this is just a parameter, so as we showed with this set title, you can pass in a parameter, and this is the type of event listener we want to listen to. But you can actually add more than one parameter to things, so we could have gone in here and said, let's say age as well, and stuff like that. However, for this one, we can actually pass through a function, and what we want to pass through is set title. Now this is we're gonna say John for now. So you can see we pass in a title called set name John. Now this is just going to instantly change it even before we click, and that's because we're actually calling the function by adding parentheses. So how do we stop it from calling? Well, there's different ways we can do it. We could even create a function, a wrapper function here. So we can say function. Now, because this is a function inside of event listener, we don't need a name for it. It's just a function that we can call. So in here, we can then say set title, and let's just set it to my name of Tyler. Hit save, and now we've got an event listener. Let's go back and refresh. You can see it says hello world. Now what happens when we click this button? You can see it changes it to hello Tyler, which is perfect. That's actually changing the code. It's working. The click works. But this isn't the only way we can do this. We can use something called an arrow function, which is a different type of function. So you can do this, do an arrow, and then do parentheses and say set title again. And this time let's just say Bob just thing. There you go, and we can click, and that does it as well. But this is basically the same as writing function, right? Well, there's one thing we can do with this. Instead of using these parentheses, we don't need to do that. We can then just do arrow function and call straight away the set title. And let's just say Tyler again. So you can see it's an arrow function that calls another function immediately. So if we go back here and we refresh, we can click me, and that changed it to hello Tyler. So I hope that's not confusing. There's a bunch of different ways you can do functions and variables, and there's a few things we can actually look into to obviously fix this, to make this look neater. So in one line we could do it to be in multiple lines, so we can add the parentheses and break it down if you want. So if you want to do more from one thing at a time, so let's say you also want a console.log in this event saying button clicked. We can then go back here. Now if we click this, it will change our name, and it will also log button clicked. So there you go, you can see that's actually on it. It even tells you the line of when you called it, and if you click that, it will show you the code you clicked and where it was called from. So you can debug it a little easier. So if you've got any errors, you can actually click this and find out where that error is. So let's go back to our code here. And there you go. So that's how we can easily change our name. We can add event listeners. Obviously, we can do stuff on scrolling. We can do a lot of other things. So what we've gone over is some DOM manipulation. So we can edit some text here. We can change the text. Let's also do an inner HTML now. So I just want to show you what inner HTML does. So now instead of just writing text, we can actually write HTML. So now I can write strong tags around this. So let's just say strong. So this is like writing HTML inside of JavaScript. It's a bit messy, but it works. So here you go, we've wrote strong, and then we've got hello and our name again. So now if we go back here and we refresh and we click me, and we actually highlight over this, you can see there's actually a strong tag in our HTML on the right here. So this is in the elements tab, and you can actually see the different elements on your page. We now have a strong tag. So if we refresh this and we just go into here, so you can see we have hello world. Now when we click the button, hello world becomes a container for another tag of strong. And there you go. So there's a bunch of different things you can do there. This would have worked better if this was like plain text. So let's just in here change this h1 to be a diff with the class. So we're going to add a class this time of, let's say, title. And let's just change this to be a diff as well. Go back to our main, and in here where we do our query selector, we just want to do dot title, and that's going to get our title element with the class of title. So let's go back, refresh. You can see it's now it's just smaller and it's bold. Let's zoom in a lot here just so it's easier to see. And if we click this button, you can see it goes bold, and that's because we're adding the strong tag in to make it go bold. And there you go. I just wanted to show you those simple basics of JavaScript to get started. So I hope you've learned the basic JavaScript. I hope you're going in and adding your own click events to change stuff. Now, this was just the start of a very basic tutorial. There is so much more you can do with JavaScript. You can do more than just setting functions. You can do more than just changing text. You can change colors of things. You can actually make it so when you click something pops up on screen. It can add classes. It can remove classes. There's so many things you can do with JavaScript, and I'm going to hopefully teach you that in over a few lessons in the next couple of weeks. So in lesson 1, we've just done variables. We've learned about variables. We've learned about const, let, var. We have learned about functions. We've learned about named functions, event list or callback functions, arrow functions, and also console log and query selector. But there is a lot more to JavaScript than just this. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button, and if you get stuck or you're confused, feel free to hop in our Discord server and drop a message in our help chat, say, hey, I'm confused with this, I want to learn JavaScript, but I'm stuck here, and hopefully someone or myself will be able to help you. Or if you just got a real quick question, then feel free to drop it in the comments down below. Thanks for watching this video, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.